Hey mamas, I am so glad you're here. We are going to be talking all things homeschool planning, weekly planning, daily planning, and lesson planning. So there are two different types of planning that I like to do. The first is forwards-looking planning, and the second is backwards planning. My weekly planning is my forward-looking planning, and this is where I just lay out all of the things that I want to accomplish during the week with the kids, taking into consideration any appointments and events that are going to directly affect our homeschooling time. This weekly outlook also helps me to figure out when the best days are for us to do our core learning. So recently our schedule has shifted a little bit because I was doing a specific thing as far as subjects with each of the kids every day, but I have since decided to just rely on my weekly outlook to help me determine when the best days are for us to do that core learning. As far as daily planning goes, this is where I do our backwards planning. So in essence, this means that as we go throughout our day and at the end of the day, I am documenting all the things that we were able to accomplish. Now I want to provide you a little bit more detail to help you understand how I do my weekly and daily planning, and then talk about how I do my lesson planning. Right off the bat, I love to use one notebook to streamline all of my planning. So I have divided my notebook into a couple of different sections, and I believe I talked about this in one of my homeschool updates, but the very first section of my notebook is just dedicated to weekly, daily planning, and then I have a section for homeschool lesson planning. I love to do my weekly planning over the course of a weekend, and this just gives me enough time for me to settle into the new week and provide myself with an outlook of what's happening. So the first area that I like to take note of when I am doing my weekly planning is appointments and events. I really love to consult with my husband, consult with my calendar, and see what's going on that's going to directly affect our homeschool. Now, sometimes spontaneous things happen where we have a spontaneous meetup with friends or we have a change of plans. So I will go back to my appointments and events list and I will add things here and there that need to be added. I also keep track of what's going on by Xing things out and putting check marks next to the things that we did. And this kind of works together with my daily planning because I will write notes about why something was canceled or why something was changed and how that affected our homeschooling day. Along with my appointments and events, I will also write down my meal planning. Here's why this is so relevant to homeschooling. I have a part-time job, and so when I'm done the homeschooling day, I have to take that time in the afternoon to do my work. And if I'm cooking, then that means that that time that I would have spent working is now taken up by some cooking time. And so I like to figure out when I'm cooking and what I'm cooking because that helps me to see how that's going to eat into my personal work time, no pun intended, and how then that might affect the amount of time that we have to spend homeschooling. If I have a child who has been having a particularly hard day and is taking a long time to do their work, or if I have one of my children just really need some extra time to spend with me to work on something, I will shelf that for the day at a certain time. So I give myself a hard stop on those days when I have to cook so that I do have time to do my part-time work and everything just kind of balances out. Then I do my weekly brain dump. And I love this because it gives me an opportunity to write down all of the things that are swimming around in my mind having to do with homeschool and also personal and home life. So I like to write out all of my ideas that I might want to do as far as activities with the kids for the week, things that I do need to prepare that I have planned for ahead of time for the kids, anything specific that I need to review with a child, and any changes that we are planning to make for this week and how we're going to institute those changes. I also like to set up some goals, and I will do that for home, personal, and homeschool. And the great thing about that is I'm able to see how those work together with one another or how they're standing in dissonance. So this helps me to see, like, are these goals actually realistic to do in 1 week? Now, during my forward-looking weekly planning, I also like to do my lesson planning. I will say that this is the ideal. Sometimes I have to do backwards planning with lessons. So this is not something that is completely set in stone, but I will say it has been so helpful for me, and here's why. The main reason why I started to lesson plan is because I just needed to get myself straight on all the lessons that I was doing with each child. All of our curriculum curriculum is pretty much open and go, but there are just some details that I kept forgetting, and I wanted to make sure that I had a scope and understanding of what is going to happen in those lessons and write down any details that I needed to remember in order to make sure that everything just happens smoothly during my lesson time with each kid. So I think it's important to give you a perspective on the things that we want to accomplish in our week as far as lessons. In reading and math, we want to do 2 lessons in each of those subjects for each of my 2 kids. And then we have other subjects. So we have the books Building Thinking Skills, as well as grammar and writing. And those I aim to do at least 1 lesson of per week. So altogether, we have 8 lessons, which breaks down 2 lessons in each of those subjects per each kid. Then I have 2 lessons of building thinking skills, 1 for each kid, and then grammar and writing with my oldest. So altogether, we have 4 plus 8 is 12 lessons that I have to plan for. I know this sounds like a lot, but what I like to do is pair some of these curriculum books together. So for instance, if we're doing our reading curriculum, which is Logic of English, for my older daughter, I do add grammar and writing into that. So one day we'll do grammar and Logic of English, and then another day we'll do writing and Logic of English. I do the exact same thing with math for each kid. So one day we'll just have math lessons, and then another time we'll add the book Building Thinking Skills to the mix. So logically, there are 5 days in which I hope to accomplish these lessons. However, sometimes we do more than 2 or more than 1, and other times we have to spend a lot longer on a lesson. So doing the weekly lesson planning really helps me to get an idea of what we're going to be able to do and what we need to review from the previous week, things like that. So for me, writing it all out is super helpful, and it takes the stress off of me to feel like I have to do more than what I really need to, and really be okay if we need to spend some extra time on something. So here's exactly what I do when I sit down to do my lesson planning. I grab our curriculum books that we need to do lessons out of, and I figure out what pages or what lessons we want to cover. Then I turn to the section of my notebook that I've designated for homeschool planning, and I will write down for each child the subject that we're working on, or the title of the curriculum, the chapter, the pages, those types of details. Then, depending on the curriculum, I will write down specific details that I need to pay attention to, and also take note of the things that we might need to review from the past lesson. For example, with my middle daughter, I am currently reviewing long and short sounds, and we've been doing that for every single lesson because it's still not clicking yet. So that's an example of something that I would write down to remind myself we have to do this, preferably at the beginning of the lesson. Now, I do not write down the exact days that we're going to be doing these lessons. This is so important because I feel like if I were to do that, it would be such a big letdown because I just can't predict how each day is going to go. I have a general idea from my weekly outlook, but again, as we all know as homeschool moms, it's not going to be exactly that way. However, just writing down the lessons, how I'm pairing them with other topics, so like I said, the reading and the grammar, really helps me to be prepared for when that core learning time happens. So needless to say, sitting and plotting out all of the things that we need to do and accomplish for each subject and each lesson has been a great stress relief for me. When we actually complete lessons, I like to put the date next to that lesson. And this, again, allows me the freedom to not feel like I have to do it on a specific day. And there have been times where, like I said, we didn't finish a lesson and we had to push it into the next week. And I will just write down the date that we started the lesson and the date that we completed it. I also like to use my daily planning pages to document anything specific that I need to remember that happened during our lesson time. Which brings me to daily planning. And this again is where I do my backwards planning. I dedicate 1 page in my notebook for each day of the week. And this allows me a lot of room room to journal, write to-dos, things like that. And this is the place where I will go and I'll write down specific observations that I've made during the homeschool day, anything significant that happened. And this has been so helpful for me to just kind of see our progression over the weeks, over the months, etc. This is the place where I also like to keep track of our points awarded for each day. So we do have a reward system here in our homeschool, and each of the different books, the different activities that we're working on, all have an amount of points that can be earned when the child completes it. So this is the place that I will write all of this down, and at the end of the day, I sit down with the kids and give them their tokens. We do a token system. They put it in the jars. It's lovely, and I have it all right there in my notebook. I will also take note of our morning basket time, what activities that we did, all of the books that we read, anything that we did with our unit study that day. So this is just a great place, an open space for me to write all of these things down. And I like to section them off too, because it can get muddled together with all of my personal to-dos and home things. So that's how I kind of keep everything separated, but I love to see things on the same page. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today, and I truly hope this video was helpful for you in your homeschool planning. Take care, be blessed, and I'll see you in the next one.